Hi everyone, this is a collaboration between Miju and Hadassah Global. We are coming together with the common cause of looking at the epidemic of drugs and our youth in Zambia. We are looking at the causes, the root causes behind it. Is it a social issue? Is it an economical issue? Is it a governmental issue? And we're going to be talking about different ways in which the youth particularly are being affected. So our focus in this particular program is to speak to the youth themselves. Let's go on the ground, let's speak to them, let's hear what they have to say. Isn't that right, Tim?
Absolutely true.
Yeah.
So we'll be looking at a number of stakeholders, each giving us a perspective on what they feel the issue is really rooted in. Join us on this particular episode as we interact with the stakeholders. Greetings, fellow environmentalists, conservationists, and mindset changers. Welcome to part 2 of the episode on drug abuse, addiction, and stigma. On the program today, we have a special guest. That's Her Royal Highness Princess Kunda from Hadassah Global. Welcome to the program.
Thank you so much, Timothy.
We'll be talking about drugs, and this particular episode is a collaboration between Hadassah Global and Mizu Eco Care. So, Princess Kunda.
Yes.
Why exactly is Hadassah Global interested in this particular issue?
Okay. For Hadassah Global, our foundation is predominantly about mental and emotional health.
Okay.
And what we found through our counseling and through our interaction with people is that we were actually finding more and more cases of young people who had this particular drug addiction problem. They were either going through the problem or they were either trying to come out of the problem. And when they came out of the problem, trying to find their place in society, mentally, emotionally, trying to find their balance and their equilibrium. So for Hadassah Global, it's important for us to talk about the drug epidemic amongst the youth, because these are the ones who we're counseling right now. These are our future presidents and leaders and so on, and we need them to be mentally and emotionally balanced and healthy. So that's where Hadassah's passion lies.
Okay. So you know, when people that are not directly in touch with those affected talk and say it's a big problem, people might not really get a clear picture.
Right.
So I think it's important to get your perspective. How big is this problem, or is it an exaggeration to say it's a big problem to the Zambian society?
I think, like you correctly said, if you're not exposed to the issues, like pretty much like most issues, like suicide, depression, any of these big mental, emotional issues, if you're not around it, you've never been involved in it in one way or another, you don't really appreciate how serious it is and what a big problem we're actually facing as a nation. Because you are talking about this pandemic affects everybody. It doesn't select your class, it doesn't select your race, it doesn't select your religious background or your political affiliation. It does not select. It affects everybody. Most of our youths, whatever their background, whatever tribe, whatever creed, most of our youths are one way or another affected with this pandemic. So it doesn't select, it doesn't have favorites.
Okay. So from your personal experience, what exactly is affecting the youth in terms of drugs? What drugs seem to be the biggest problem?
I think for Hadassah Global, because we're dealing with mental and emotional health, and for us, the key to us as Hadassah Global is we always want to find out the root. Why are you taking drugs? Where has this come from? Because we believe if you don't know what the root is, you can never deal with the problem. So for many of the people who we face, there are many reasons why they've gotten involved with drugs. And that's why we're doing this documentary, because we thought it would be key to actually hear from the horse's mouth. Let's hear what the young people have to say, because a lot of the explanations and a lot of the theories have been done by us, the adults, but we're not in that generation. We're not on the streets with them, dealing with what they have to deal with on a daily basis. So that's why we collaborated and said, let's hear it from them, the ones who are actually on the ground, the ones who are actually taking these drugs, and let's hear what they have to say about it. So in terms of how we can actually dissect what the cause is, is to do with family. Families have to be involved, they're key. Because like I'm saying, the children who are affected by drugs are not just ghetto street kids. They're everyday children from every type of school, whether it's boarding school, whether it's day school, they're affected. So we have to be able to really find out what is the root. Is it a fashion trend? Is it because our children are no longer able to deal with emotions? We haven't taught our children to deal with emotions. Is it peer pressure? Is it stress? What is actually going on? Why are our children finding that taking this stuff is actually the solution to their problems?
So, Princess Kunda, what exactly are the root causes to the problem of drug that the youths in Zambia are facing?
I think the root causes can be various underlying factors. It can be family situations, it can be school situations, it can be peer pressure, it can be what they're finding on social media or what they're finding on the internet. There's an array of reasons why our youth are being attracted to taking drugs. There's not one specific direction. But what we are finding is that it is a problem. The common denominator is that it's a problem. But why all of them are deciding that this is the way of dealing with their problems is what we really want to find out.
When we look at the scourge as it's currently unfolding, what are the consequences to the nation of our youths and adults being involved in the consumption of drugs?
Well, first of all, the type of drugs that our youth are now involved in, we know medically speaking, and we're going to have medical doctors who actually verify some of these side effects in maybe the other parts that we're going to do. But we know medically, biologically, there's going to be a side effect. There's going to be a problem for their health. Meaning we're going to have a large amount of youth who actually die before they even get the chance to become parents, to get married, or to even establish themselves in careers. So we're going to have a huge gap of the generation of youth who are just gone. They're just gone because of this thing of taking drugs. Because any type of medication, even the ones that you're prescribed by the doctors, they tell you of side effects. And that's why they prescribe you only a certain length of time. So there are consequences to anything that you consume. But now the problem with our youth is that they're consuming these drugs, and even they are not fully aware of the damage, and some of it is irreparable damage that they're actually doing to their bodies. So we're going to have a generation where they're all gone, and we're also going to have a generation where they just can't function. They can't function in society. So we've got a big problem. If we're going to be looking to the next generation of youth, who are they and where are they? What's going to happen? What's going to happen when you and I are no longer on camera talking about issues that affect our environment? Who's going to be the next to come along and follow suit?
Exactly. Another issue I would like you to offer a perspective on. The Zambian government has just made it legal for certain business entities that qualify to actually grow marijuana and actually sell it outside. I guess that will have an impact on the consumption of marijuana in the country. As an NGO linked to this particular issue, what's your opinion on that, the legalization of marijuana growing?
I think, look, the issue for me, having come from a European background as well, where in some places of Europe it's legal, you can actually consume it as well as sell it. It's on commercial basis. The problem with any type of drug is the control. So what the government are actually saying, they're not saying it's legal for anyone to just stand on the street and smoke it. That's not the point. What they're saying is that they want to be able to grow this marijuana, but grow it in a controlled environment. Because even just to obtain the license to be able to control that is extremely high. It's high financially, and it's also high on the requirements that you're supposed to meet in order to be somebody who can grow this stuff. So it's not as black and white as we've wanted to make it seem, that it's legal and you can just now stand on the street corner and smoke marijuana. No, it's still illegal to do that. But to grow it in the way that they want to do it now and commercialize it, it's going to be only a very small niche of people who'll be able to do that. So again, it's control. The kind of marijuana they're talking about growing is not the marijuana that our youth are smoking. The marijuana our youth are smoking, most of it, if you test it and you speak to people like Dick and they actually test it, it's got a lot of other chemicals that are in there. And that's the problem. That's why you find a lot of youth hallucinate because they take the marijuana. They have trips. They mentally they're unstable because it's not controlled. There are other things that they actually put in there.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So as Hadassah Global, what advice would you give to families that have a family member that's actually affected or addicted to drugs? Where do they go? How do they get help?
It's a difficult one because if you're talking about your youth, if you're talking about your children, it's much easier to actually be able to enforce help. But if you're talking about a child who's maybe 19, 20, 21 years old, it's very difficult to enforce it. But there is help. The rehab centers, as ourselves, Hadassah Global are also having a rehab center. We have counselors, we have psychotherapists, we have psychologists. So there is help there. They can always communicate with us on our Hadassah Global site or with yourselves. You can refer them to us. There is help out there. But again, it's trying to get that kind of help where the counseling and help, psychological help and counseling is not just about the person who's going through the treatment. It's the whole community. It's everybody who is affected by that individual. So when you have an individual going for counseling, you must also engage the parents, you must engage the siblings. Anybody who lives with them has to be brought into that counseling because it's a journey for everybody. You are re-educating, you're resensitizing, it's for everyone.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the issue of counseling often leads to the issue of stigma.
Yeah.
You know, we live in a society where people become suspicious and start saying things, spreading all kinds of stories. What advice do you give to the members of the society out there on stigma? The danger of stigma in hampering the treatment of people affected by drugs.
Yes, it's very big. It's very big, and I would encourage the members of the public out there to just be a bit more sympathetic and a bit more sensitive. These are people who need help. They're not sick per se, but they need help. So by you labeling them and making them feel bad, you're actually not helping them heal and get the help that they really, really desperately need. And like I'm saying, it affects everybody. In my family, it's affected me. I know friends that it's affected them. I know people who are very prominent people, it's affected them. This is not something that you should run away and be ashamed about. If your friend or if your relative is going through this thing, this is something that everybody is affected in one way or another. And we need to just stop the labeling. We need to be able to say, look, if you need the help, let me give you the help. Because like you're saying, that is the biggest problem in our society, is that everyone has got something to say. And it's always a negative thing, and we need to stop that negativity, because you just don't know when one day it could be somebody who's very close to you who's going through. I think we went through that with the whole AIDS HIV issue. Everyone had something to say. There was always a label until it started hitting everybody. Then that's when the stigma kind of dropped, because we realized it can happen to you too.
Well, thank you so much, Princess Kunda, for sharing your perspective on the issue. Thank you
so much
for coming.
No, thank you. Thank you for this very important documentary.
So join us as we speak to other concerned stakeholders on the issue of drug abuse, addiction, and stigma.